exercise science divided. So we have two camps in exercise science that have really come about, especially in this last year or two. We have the Mike Israetel, Jeff Nippard side, which they have certain beliefs and ideas based on research that they're reading. And then you have another side that is Drew Bay, Jay Vincent, that tends to favor training similar to Dorian Yates and Mike Menser. Now, these two sides are at odds with each other. They do not see eye to eye, although there are a few similarities and things that they do see eye to eye on. Let's go over those. So first, they see eye to eye on training hard. Training hard is valued in both camps. Although the high intensity training camp would say that you need to train at a maximal intensity, right? There is no good reason to hold back. Whereas the Mike Israetel, more modern researcher volume side, you could say, would say that you want the sets to be hard, but not too hard. And they agree that you need to be in the gym, you need to be weight training, right? We can agree on that. So frequency, high intensity training would say you need to train only as frequently as you can recover from. There's not an actual day amount or time of rest, but it needs to be an amount that you can recover from, which can generally be in the ballpark of 3 to 8 days, give or take. Maybe there's some outliers, but within that range somewhere you should be ready to train again. And then the volume group would say that you can train every day or close to every day as long as you change the muscle that you're training. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, which is volume. So you have one side saying that research says more volume gets you more growth. You have another side that says, wait, actually more volume doesn't always get you more growth. And in fact, the research is very kind of gray on that. And sometimes it does, but a lot of times it really doesn't get you more growth. So when it comes to volume, we need to understand what is volume. Now, volume has been defined recently as your sets times reps times weight, and more simply, it's really just the amount of sets you perform. And then hard sets, they would say. Whereas in the high intensity training group, your volume is really just, you're only doing one set per exercise, so it's however many exercises you do in one session. That's really going to be your volume. Mike Israetel, Jeff Nippard's side would say that volume is important and that you want a lot of it, and that would be measured by reps and sets. Whereas with high intensity, you don't have to perform reps. We're not saying that reps are the definition of volume, because really what is being trained is your skeletal muscles, and when they are contracting, they are contributing to the fatigue and ultimately on the way to muscle failure. So basically a set is defined differently within these two camps. One camp would say a set is when you perform repetitions with resistance until what point? You have to finish that sentence. You have to come to a conclusion of what point does the set terminate. And that's extremely invaluably important when it comes to research in training subjects, when it comes to prescribing exercise. When does the set terminate? And on the high intensity side, you would say a set is contracting your muscles until failure, momentary muscular failure, until you cannot move the weight in a positive direction, and you're also can't even hardly hold the weight up any longer either. So that would be momentary muscle failure. Let's go over the set duration, right? So in the Mike Israetel, Jeff Nippard side, a set duration could be 10 seconds, 20 seconds, give or take. And then a set duration with high intensity training, it's going to be 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Top end would be 2 minutes, but within that range. So you can see the high intensity training, the sets last a lot longer, and they're only going to be doing one of them. Whereas if you add up the set time for multiple set training, you come out with what would be one set for the high intensity training. So really the total time training in the actual exercises is similar, but the workout times are going to be drastically different, right? To do a multiple set, higher volume workout, take you 45 minutes, hour and a half, 2 hours. Whereas if you're doing high intensity training, your workouts are going to take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30, 45, really. So you're not really going to go over 45 minutes if you're training with high intensity. So we have two separate sides, and if you think about it, they're both reading research and they're both saying that research backs their conclusions. So this is very important. This is where research really comes into the picture and informs both sides as to what is the truth of the matter. The Mike Isertel, Jeff Nippard's side of exercise science uses a lot of very current research. They look a bit down upon older studies. If something has a date that's past, 2010, it's older than that, they're really not interested in it. Whereas the high intensity training community is interested in all research from all dates, especially older ones, recent ones. It doesn't really matter the dates so long as their information that was discovered or found from the study was important and was valid. And this plays into why today we see a lot of people saying that volume is a very important driver of muscle growth. And they're citing studies. The studies they're citing are typically meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis are the top end of the research pyramid, if you will. And what a meta-analysis is a summation of multiple studies. The problem with this is meta-analysis also inherently acquire the mistakes that were made in those individual studies, and then it ends up magnifying the results, which in turn magnifies the misleading or mistakes that could be found within studies, such as the Brad Schoenfeld study that found that more volume gave you more muscle growth. This study included 8 or 9 research studies, and out of those 8 or 9, only 2 of them actually had found increases in muscle growth. And it's important to know that, because you could go to that meta-analysis, read the conclusion, and say, well, more volume makes more growth. But if you actually go in and read the research studies that were included, you would see that, wait a minute, only 2 of them actually saw improvements. And then if you go into those 2 studies, you start questioning who's training to failure. Are they training to failure, right? Because training to failure is how you standardize training. What is a set if you don't stop at muscular failure, right? Your body needed to fail the set. You can't just stop because the set got hard. How do we measure that? How do we compare sets that are at different intensities? We're comparing apples to oranges. And that's the biggest issue when it comes to high intensity training versus modern volume exercise scientists. When you try to consider each other's point of view, you don't understand what the other one's saying, because the volume group does not know what it's like to go through a high intensity training workout. They've never been through a workout like that. So they have no clue how it feels and what it's like. If you do an intense high intensity training set, you're not doing multiple sets of that for the same muscle group, for the same exercise, for sure. You're not going to be doing multiple sets of that because you stimulated all of the available muscle fibers in one long, difficult set. It saves you time and accomplishes the same thing that multiple set training does. So anyway, it's important to cite research when you're going to make claims that more volume gets you more growth. And the sad thing is, the totality of the research, if you really look back and look at all the available research, the truth is that more volume does not give you more growth. Sometimes they find that, but it's actually fairly rare. And the reason you would find that, the reason that more sets would get you more growth, is because the first set did not adequately stimulate all the muscle fibers. So if you did one set and you got a certain amount of muscle fiber recruitment and stimulation. You had a second group doing 2 sets and they got more growth. You had a third group doing 3 sets and they got more growth. You need to back up and you need to assess what is a set and how hard are you actually having these subjects train. They're not training to momentary muscle failure if they're getting more growth with more sets. If they were training to momentary muscle failure, then they would all have the same growth and the group training 2 and 3 sets would feel like they're overtraining and their progress would probably drop. That's what the research would find. But it's important with research because you have to have results that are replicable, right? If somebody takes your study, has the same parameters that you did, they should come out with the same conclusion that you had, the same similar data, right? But in exercise science, we're not having that. Why? Because we're not standardizing what a set looks like. Is there momentum involved? How fast are these repetitions performed? I've read studies where they say you have to perform the repetitions 1 second down and as fast as possible for the concentric coming up. And they said that that was controlled form. So what is lifting with control? What is training to failure? If you have one set where you did 6 reps in about 10 seconds and you reach failure, you couldn't do another rep, versus another high intensity type set where you trained for 90 seconds in that one set and used a moderate weight and you slowly and surely got to where your muscles were grinding and they couldn't perform another rep, you were in an isometric hold. Those are completely different sets. They have completely different parameters and you really can't even compare the two. One of them probably barely got your cardiovascular system involved, used a much heavier weight, whereas another one used a more moderate weight, had less stress on the joints, less stress on the connective tissues, however, heavily involved your cardiovascular system as you approached muscular failure. So it's up to you guys to decide what path you want to take and whose advice you want to follow. I get comments all the time on my videos, hey, what about what Mike Isertel and Jeff Nippard say? They're saying something completely different, Cameron. You're completely wrong. Well, no, I'm not wrong. It comes down to the research that you're willing to read and comprehend and understand. Just because a research study is published doesn't mean there's no flaws to it. Doesn't mean they couldn't be better, that it's not above critique. So it's important to read research with a critical eye so that you can see, oh, you know what? These researchers said that these participants trained until they were uncomfortable with doing another repetition or until voluntary exhaustion. That's not muscle failure. What is that? You can't just stop the exercise whenever you feel like it because you're not going to get the same stimulus as somebody who continues the exercise all the way to muscle failure. So we have 2 sides right now and they're going to continue to go back and forth about it. And it's important that we define our terms so that we can understand what we're talking about when it comes to volume, intensity, frequency. We still have people that say intensity is how much weight you're putting on the bar. That's for powerlifting. That's a powerlifting metric. You can't use that across the broad continuum of the entire gym, of the entire field of exercise. Effort is a more direct way of knowing how hard you're pushing. Now, you can't really measure effort, right? All you have is no effort when you haven't even started the exercise, and you have muscle failure, which is 100% effort. So you really can't measure 90% effort, 95% effort, because muscle probably does grow at less than 100% effort, right? It probably does. We don't know what that number is. We don't know if it's 88%, 95%. We don't know. That's why it's important to push yourself to failure so you know you crossed over whatever point that was and you know you stimulated muscle growth. Now it's going to be more fatiguing to do that, so you're going to have to take more rest days. The volume camp likes to think that the high intensity training camp is just taking way too many days off, when that's not true. We're taking off the amount of days needed to recover and actually show up to the gym again and push ourselves to the limits and try to progressively overload. If you're showing up to the gym every single day, your progress is going to be much slower because you're always tired from the day before, right? You have systemic fatigue that affects your entire body. If you train back one day, the next day you go in to train chest, you're a little bit tired. Your chest may not be tired, but your body as a whole is tired because fatigue is cumulative and systemic across your entire body. If you ran a 5K one day, the next day, should you be able to max your bench? Well, on that logic, yeah, you should, but no, you cannot. Why? Because you're systemically fatigued. It wasn't the same muscle group, but your body held the fatigue systemically. So all these factors come into play. I just wanted to make this video to point out some of the differences and to point out that it's important that we understand what the terms are, what a set is, right? How the set looks, when is the set terminated, and that will determine if you need to do another set or not. Now, just because the number 1 is on one set, a lot of people just seem to think that that is so annoying to them. It's annoying, that one set idea, right? A lot of people have invested money into training with multiple sets. People have invested money into their programs, into their apps, into their training plans that you can purchase from them. So for some of these people to even consider that one set could be enough, that's a slap in the face to their entire business, which could inevitably put them under, right? So you don't want your business to go down. You want to stand by your business and your business model. Therefore, other people's ideas have to be false. So it's just interesting to me that one side is labeled as dogmatic when the other side is being dogmatic about saying the other side is dogmatic. So anyway, it's up to each individual to do their own research, to train and to experiment with their own training, because, you know, if you've never tried volume training, then you should try it. Try doing multiple sets for every exercise. Try to leave 2 reps in reserve or 1 rep in reserve, whatever the recommendations are. Try to do, 15 sets a week per muscle group. See what it does. And then on the other hand, I recommend trying high intensity training. Try 1 set per exercise, no more than 2 exercises per muscle group. Try making your sets last between 1 to 2 minutes using a moderate weight, slowing down the reps, okay? Instead of 1 second up, 1 second down, try doing 3 seconds, 5 seconds each way. See for yourself how it feels. Take it all the way to failure and continue to push yourself as hard as possible. Anyone can just add sets to their training, but we need to be focusing and teaching people how to train harder. That way they can use less volume, right? If you have someone who's not training that hard, they might take 5 sets on the same exercise to finally feel tired and that they actually stimulated the target muscle. Whereas another person who trains very, very focused, intense, and hard and doesn't just quit or give up when it's uncomfortable, they may take only 1 or 2 sets. So I would rather see people train harder and do less volume so that you can save your joints, your tendons, and not do as much mechanical work. We're not here to do mechanical work. We're here to do what is required, right? The amount of work required to stimulate muscle growth and strength. So hopefully you learned something from this video. This is Coach Cam. I have a master's in exercise science. I have a certified strength conditioning specialist certification, and I've been training for 10 years. And so this is my critique on the 2 sides of exercise science.